The poem I selected for the IOC is Out Out by Robert Frost. The theme I found in the poem was that the child's loss of innocence causes his loss of his life both literally and figuratively. We see this in the poem through the speaker's knowledge about life, elements of the structures such as caesura, its ever-changing tone, and the grotesque imagery in the story. I'm going to start off with the speaker's knowledge about life. We see in the poem how the speaker is someone who is older than the boy and has experienced life. He realizes the joy in relaxing from your work. He says that a day was all but done. I wish they might have said to please the boy. So that diction right there of pleasing the boy shows that he would appreciate the relaxing of life. He has hindsight on life. Again, by that saying please the boy by giving him the half hour. That's ironic because if they'd given him the half hour, that would have given him obviously so much more of his life than he had. And another thing that the speaker could be reflecting, obviously not literally because the boy in the poem dies, but he could be reflecting figuratively on his loss of innocence. Yes, Dad, I'm going to get it later. Figuratively reflecting on his loss of innocence in his childhood by when later in the poem the boy says, "Don't let him cut my hand off. The doctor when he comes, don't let him, sister." This could be the speaker saying, when I was little, they tried to take my innocence, so don't let the doctor do that to me. He sees the negative at the end of the story when he said, "And they, since they were the one not dead, turned to their affairs." So he's obviously a watcher from the outside. He's not maybe a part of the family. And he seems to have an omniscient view of the people. He talks about the watcher as poles taking fright. He talks about the boy's outcry, and no one believes, so he kind of gives a perspective on the whole story. Next, we'll move on to the elements of structure in the story. We have an increasing amount of caesura in the story, and that shows the brokenness of the boy, both literally because obviously his hand gets chopped off, and figuratively because he loses that innocence, or that boy-like, that childhood kind of naivety of, kind of like, oh, I can live forever, feeling invincible. And there's also, towards the end of the story, there's an increase of in-stopped lines that can show us two things. One, it increases the suspense in the story, so we don't know till the second to last line that the boy is actually going to die. So it increases the suspense. And it also figuratively symbolizes his death because his life is ending just like these lines are ending. Next, we'll move on to the ever-changing tone in the story. There's a stark contrast of words at the beginning, and that kind of foreshadows the boy's fate in the end. It talks about the buzzsaw snarled and rattled in the yard and made dust and dropped stove-length sticks of wood. So the contrast of the dust and the stove-length sticks of wood shows us that contrast between childhood and adulthood, and how there's really, in the boy's life, there's not much of a transition, or no transition at all, because he never makes it to adulthood. He dies in his childhood. Other things that contrast, it talks about the sweet scented stuff when the breeze drew across it, but there's also that snarled and rattled. So there's the cacophonous words juxtaposed with the euphonous words in the story. There's also And it says after it says for the second time, and the saw snarled and rattled, as it ran light or had to bear a load. So the light contrasting with had to bear a load shows the naivety of childhood when it says it's running light but had to bear a load, as when you become an adult you become much more stressed about things. You have a lot more that's required of you, so you have to work harder, more people depending on you. The tone becomes more and more regretful throughout the story. It talks about, like I said, it says Senate in the beginning, even though there are some cacophonous words in the beginning. It's lighter at the beginning, and then it talks about a rueful laugh from the boy, the life from spilling from it. The doctor put him in the dark of ether. So all these words and fright, they all contribute to that overall meaning of, he's losing his innocence, and as you're losing that innocence, it's a scary process. Also, there's that contrast, just like at the beginning, at the end, it kind of frames the story. It talks about how the watcher at his pulse took fright, no one believed. So that would lead you to believe that the watchers kind of cared about how the boy was doing. And then the last line says, and they, since they were the one not dead, turned to their affairs. So there's that contrast between, they didn't believe that the boy was dying, but they still kind of moved on in life. So he's telling us either that, there's time to regret and then there's time to move on, or that, we need to be a little bit more respectful in death than maybe these people were being. The next thing in the poem that contributed to the theme is the grotesque imagery. It talked about, one thing that was vivid to me is how the saw, as if to prove that saws knew what supper meant, leaped out of the boy's hand. Seeing this visually would be like a frightening thing, like a saw just jumping out of your hand. That'd be scary. The dark of ether. I don't know how it feels to be under ether, but I'm sure that would be a scary, very dark feeling. And this boy is feeling that as he's nearing the end of his life. And it talks about his heartbeat, little, less, nothing. So that signifies death in the end. And it also talks about how he was trying to keep his life from spilling from his hand. So this all contributes to the theme of loss of innocence can cause a loss of life, both figuratively and literally. And I'm done.